I'm Rick from Cartage Classic Cars. On this video, we're going to go ahead and we're going to modify the rear seat for a wheel tub on a 70 to 74 E-body. That's going to be the Cudas and Challengers. I've done this before. The last car we did this on was a Challenger. We didn't film it, so I figured now would be a good time on how you go about modifying the rear seat for seat tubs. This is going to be for pretty much any car you put the rear seat in. Might not be as specific, but the concept's the same. So you see right here, we're finishing up on the 70 Cuda. We're still waiting on a hood. I'm going to show you what we're starting with on this car. So we have the rear seat, which is in really good shape here. You see we got our rear tubs, which I don't think I did a video on this car or anything, but you see we put them in. That's going to be a 3-inch mini tub on both sides of the car. And now what we're trying to do is we're trying to fit this rear seat in the car. How it works, there's 2 clips up top. The seat falls into place on those clips, and you can see without even doing any more, we're really on these edges on both sides, we're going to have to come in. Now on the bottom seat, what we're looking at, same concept. So when we put the seat in here, we're mostly focused on these corners down here. That's what we need to get to fit in this car. So it's gonna be a little bit tight fit. Let's pull the seats back out and we'll go through it, and I'll show you the first step in the process. All right, so before you start this process, go ahead and buy a set of hog ring pliers and hog rings, because we're not going to reuse them. So we'll get to that later. What the first step you're going to need to do is you have to pull the seat cover and seat foam out. We're going to be welding on this thing, cutting, and you're going to destroy your seat. Whether you're keeping it or not, this thing will go up in flames real quick. So, like I said, we'll just sit there. I'm going to cut the old hog rings. Basically, you see how they kind of just wrap around. So we'll just end up cutting them, and the pliers are there in case we got to pull them out. I don't even think we need the pliers. So we'll go around, we're going to just snip all these hog rings out.
When removing these hog rings, you really want a good set of cutters. That's going to do the least amount of damage to the seat. Even if you're not keeping the seat, this is still the easier of the options. What you're going to do, you're going to just make one slice in the back of the hog rings, and then basically sometimes you got to cut twice, but you can just wrap them right back around out of the seat cover. That's going to be easier than using vice grips or a set of pliers to try to bend them.
There's a couple hog rings holding this foam on. I'm not going to worry about cutting them because they're so buried in there. So we're going to kind of just pull those off, and we'll come back and we'll fix them when we put it back together. We are going to reinstall the seat cover. It's in good shape. I don't know if the owner is going to put a new one down the road, but as of right now, this one's going to go back on. And you see, with the E-body seats, it kind of the bottom folds out, and it comes back up that way. So now we got the seat out. We got some hog rings. Let's move this cover on the side. And then let's go ahead and pull this inner protectant out too. And we're going to leave this top. I'm not worried about that catching on fire. So what we're going to end up doing, let's do the other seat, the rear seat, and we want to get it in the metal frame, and then you'll see when we set it in the car how the seat installs and how we're going to modify it.
It's the same concept with the lower portion of the rear seat. Go ahead and just remove the hog rings. Now is a good time if you decide to, and you're going to in the future, put a new seat cover on the car. So this could be all done at the same time, and just get your interior portion of the seats done.
Now, one thing I want to go over too, if you look, you could see there's holes right there. Those are where we're going to put our hog rings back in when we reinstall this. You could see they pretty much clamp around those holes. So as you're cutting these hog rings off, notice where they are and take a mental note, because if you don't have an E-body, your car might be slightly different. So you just got to see where the hog rings go in, take a mental note, and that's what we're going to go back through as we're reinstalling them. So just a little extra piece of information. Let's keep cutting this.
Another piece of advice is, you can see I'm pretty much starting in the center of one area and working my way around to make sure I do not miss any of the hog rings. And I'm kind of just pulling the seat cover around just to make sure, like peeling back the tape to make sure it's not sticking anywhere else, and then we slowly work it off.
Alright, so I'm going to finish cutting the rest of, same thing, the hog rings right around. We're going to remove this area too because it's flammable, and that's about where we're going to have to weld. And we'll come back and go back to the car. I'll show you how we're going to go about fitting this in. So now we're going to install the seat like we would normally in the car without the cover, of course. You could see there's going to be hooks there on both sides, and they're going to go into the hooks up here. So even if you don't modify the seat, this is the idea on how to install a rear seat on an e-body, and really most of the muscle cars are the same way. So the first step, like I said, what we're going to do, you always install the back of the rear seat first, and you got the two hooks. They slide in there, and you see it kind of just sits right across the back package tray. And then the idea is down here, these get pushed down, and there's screws that there's going to hold them in there and there through the bottom. So that's the idea. So what we need to do, you could see we're hitting right there and up top. So what we're going to end up doing, we basically want to move this edge over. Now, I'm going to try to keep the top edge. So what we're going to try to do here, we're going to try to not mess with this area yet. It's been a while since I did one of these. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to basically cut the seat. It looks like right there, just to get it cut initially, and we're going to kind of fold it over, and we're going to try to tack it in there. As far as the top, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to put a slice, looking about, I'm going to say right there, because we're trying not to mess with the rear springs yet. We probably will have to mess with them, but same thing over here. So we're going to cut right there, same concept, and we're going to cut on the bottom. I cut right there and possibly fold it over. So let's go ahead and cut this, and then we'll come back and kind of just push everything together and see what we got. You could also see I folded this area out of the way as I pulled the hog rings that held them on. We're just going to modify that and leave the rest of it on.
A little further detail is I'm pretty much just making generic cuts right now away from the springs, because we're going to fold these brackets over on themselves and get our true cut in a little bit. So at this point, we're just removing them. I also removed this spring right here that was kind of holding and supporting the side of the seat. So you could see I cut that on both sides. And then we went through and there's these little brackets holding the other springs to the seat bracket to just give it support on the edges. So we're going to go ahead and remove those without hurting the springs themselves. And then we turn around and do the other side. The idea is we just want to separate these brackets completely from the seat frame, and that will give us more mobility in the future, and we can put them wherever we want at that point.
You saw we cut a little bit more than I initially said. We basically removed this spring and just removed the whole arm, including this. What that's going to allow us to do is kind of keep the bracket together and slide the whole thing forward. We bolted the seat back in down here, so right now this is where we want it. As you could see, this seat fits out in the front, so what we're trying to do is just take the thickness out of the seat, so when you look back here, hopefully all this should just wrap up and fit. So what we're going to do, I said we got our side bracket and we don't want to modify this too much, so we're going to just kind of slide it back here. It's going to go under that part of the bracket, and this is just a test fittings phase. So you can see we're moving this spring over, that was moving that there, and we want it about right there. So it looks like we're going to cut this top level, and you kind of get an idea of what we're trying to do here. So we're basically going to come right up here, cut level with that bracket straight down. We'll clean it up. We are going to cut this spring off right here. Actually, you know what we're going to, I might try to, before we cut this, we're going to probably try to bend this over and then weld a spring on there. We'll see how that works. And then this one down here, we're going to cut right there too. So right there, and what we're doing when we cut it, we're going to leave the white. So same thing right here, we're going to leave all the white paint marker on there. So coming over to this side, Same thing. Gonna slide this back in there. Both of these sides should mirror each other. So we want to lift this up, put that under there, and same thing over here. We're gonna just come straight up here, and that one we could come over a little bit. Actually, we're gonna be about right there. So with this one, yeah, actually that works out pretty good. So we're gonna kind of just come over. Again, we're leaving the white paint marker, and then this spring, the idea behind that, we're hopefully gonna actually come over, yeah, we'll come over a little bit more. Rather have to cut again. So right there, we're gonna pull this whole seat out again. We're gonna end up cutting this, and what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna start tacking those in place first. I'm gonna try to bend these springs and see what we can do with them. If I can't, it's not a huge deal. We'll just kind of cut those two out, and that should hopefully get us in the ballpark. So let's get to it.
So now that we have our marks from our brackets overlapping on the seat, you could see we could go ahead and cut the bottom of the seat because the bracket sat on top of the seat and that made our mark. Now with our brackets, we can go ahead and cut the brackets off on the top because it looked cleaner with them tucking under the seat. I'm trying to weld right here, you see right on the edge, because that's gonna be the least obvious.
So now that we got everything marked out and cut, we're gonna go ahead and just tack it in. We're not gonna fully weld right now to make sure it fits. So I'm gonna have to kind of just do it by holding it because we're gonna be bending it, so the clamps are gonna be a pain in the butt. So like I said, I'm gonna kind of just tack one edge at a time.
I think the rear portion of the seat is actually a little bit easier because you're not fighting the springs like you're going to have to in the lower portion. But you see right here, I just kind of held them up in place, tacked them. I did have to make a little basically filler piece because that's where we actually cut out that spring support and it left a big gap there. So we want to make sure this frame is really the whole structure of the seat, so it's got to be really strong and stout. We really want to make sure a lot of, people sit on this, so it shouldn't have tons of pressure, but we don't want the seat coming apart in the back, because once that part gives a rigidity, it has a chance of ripping the seat cover. So just make sure everything's strong and nothing's going to break when you install it in the car.
As far as the spring now, we're going to try to just tack it to kind of hold it on the plate just from moving in and out. So it's not really ideal, but I think it's going to be better. See, and that should hold just like that just fine. Again, this seat shouldn't have a lot of pressure put onto it, so once it's in the car, I don't think a lot of things are going to push against it. And I don't really like welding the springs that much, but again, in this situation, we're just using it to hold it down. All right, so let's go see how this rear seat fits. And if it fits well, we're gonna start on the bottom before we go ahead and weld this thing back up.
This is exactly how the top of the rear seat should install when everything fits right and it's not binding. We just throw it in the clips and put our 2 screws in.
All right, we're gonna go get the welder and we're gonna tack these 2 springs because I'm pretty happy where that seat is. It's pretty strong, it looks good, it's not hitting anything, and everything should be support. So let's tack these up for a little more support, and then we'll grab the bottom. So the bottom seat basically slides back and then clips in these front clips. So what we need to do, kind of the same concept, we're going to try to leave the top alone, but we got to bring these springs in here. How I think we're going to do it, it looks like, measuring it out, we need to go about 1.5 1.25 inches in. So what I think we're going to end up doing, we're going to take 1/2 inch out of this one right here, tack it, and we're going to take 1/2 inch out of this mark right there. So that's going to pull both of them in. We might take a little bit more out of this one, so hopefully those two, and that's going to compress the back. Same thing on the front right here. We're going to take 1/2 inch out of that one, and we're going to take, and again, we're going to have to re-drill for our hog ring. So same thing, 1/2 inch out of this one. So that's going to compress these two, and again, same thing over here. So we're going to move that area, and we're going to cut this area, and then same thing with this one. And what we're trying to do here is we're basically trying to cut it and not mess with the spring mounts or anything. Like I said, I don't want to weld the springs. If we could just kind of pull these together and move a little bit, I think it's going to be easier. So last time I did this, we ended up actually cutting the spring and overlapping them on another car. And like I said, I think every time we do these projects, you just modify it. That's what I'm trying to share with what I'm doing right now in the video. So if you're doing this on your seat, you get an idea, learn from my mistakes in the past, or where I've learned to make things even better. What I'm going to do, since we know where our marks are going to be, I'm actually going to transfer, and we're going to do, I said about 1 1/4 inch. We're going to do 3/4 inch, 3/4 inch, 3/4 inch, and 3/4 inch here. So I can do it on the back side and cut it. It's going to be easier. And we want it, like I said, we're trying to do it measured, so we do it both on the same on both sides. So that should be 1.5 inches, and that should give us a little bit more of room in there. So there's our 3/4 inch there.
You might be asking, why are we cutting the front and rear sections when the rear sections are the only thing binding up? What I found in the past is when you cut just the back of them and kind of bend it in, it puts the seat in a weird bind and kind of lifts up in an unnatural state. By cutting the front and rear, we're not binding the springs, we push them closer together. The top springs are still at the same location, so the seat should look the same there. And then when we're wrapping the cover, now that they're both cut evenly, we should be able to wrap the seat around without as much bunching up because the front's not pulling tight and the back's looser. This has come from trial and error and just making something better from issues we've had in the past.
All right, we're going to get the welder out and we're going to tack it up. I'm not going to clean it up because everything's so bouncing around, so we should be able to just tack it and we come back through and clean it up a little bit later.
So now we're taking out the MIG welder. Make sure you have a good ground on everything. We did clean up that area, and you can see it's the same concept as before with the upper portion of the seat. I'm basically working with the vice grips and by hand, and I'm basically pushing everything together. This is going to be a little bit harder because now you're fighting the pressures of the upper springs that are trying to push the seat more out forward. So you're basically, like I said earlier, tucking the bottom in. So the idea is to just get everything as close as you can. You might have to weld up some gaps. That's another reason why we're not TIG welding this, plus you're never going to see it. So you can see right here, we're not bothering the spring perches. I did lose one, you just had to go find it off the floor and pick it back up. So you can actually probably do this with the springs out of the car, but I like to do it with the springs on it because I feel like that's less of a chance that the springs are going to go in an unnatural position. So you can see right here, we're kind of just pulling them in, and it's going to roll the seat up a little bit, but in general, at the outcome of this, I'm way happier doing the lower portion this way.
All right, so we got this pretty much tacked up. You can see these ends are really under a lot of spring tension, but let's get in the car. I just have them tacked up. If we have to take more out, what we're gonna do, we're gonna start taking more out over here and work our way over. We're just shrinking, almost like chopping a top on the car. We're taking a little bit out in different sections to get the overall picture of what we want. So let's get back to the car. So looking at the rear seat before we put the bottom in, we're just kind of doing this at the fly at the moment. I could tell that we still have to push that top back down. Because we cut those spring brackets off. So what we're going to do, we're going to basically tack and weld this spring to that bottom plate right there. Now here's a trick when welding the springs. Like I said, it's not ideal, but you want to weld first on the bracket, then work your puddle up to the spring. If you weld the spring first, the spring material, you're going to break the spring. So focus on the bracket and then pull it back up. Let's get this done and we'll get the rear seat in there. So same thing over here. Basically want that to come all the way down again. You can see how that changes the seat height. There we go, just 2 tacks, and you see that basically now, looking at the top of this, it lines back up to where we were. So that's exactly what we want there. Now, the bottom. You know, we got our bottom modified. It's all tacked in place, and it's really, even with those tacks, this frame and everything is really strong. So how that's going to go in, like I said, these 2 right here are your bottom brackets that the seat clips in. That's the same for most of these muscle cars. So you kind of slide the seat in there and you basically kick it forward and it locks in, and there we go. We're pretty much dead on. The seat height here holds the bottom, and don't forget there's going to be padding and everything. We got a little bit of wiggle room, which is what we want when we get the pads and everything on here. So I'm really happy with the way that this seat frame fits. I think right now what we're going to end up doing now, we're going to weld it all up, you know, clean it up a little bit. I'm gonna leave most of the welds on the inside because it's being covered with the vinyl, the interior cover and the padding. I'd just rather have it stronger. There's no sense in spending extra time cleaning it up. So let's go ahead and get this thing welded, and then we'll get a little bit of paint on it just to protect it from rust on the inside. I mean, again, it's on the inside of the car, and this seat is in really good shape right now, so I'm not super worried about it, but like I said, we'll protect the bare metal spots, and we'll recover the seat and hopefully do a final install on it.
The whole goal for this seat project, and I should have said this in the opening scene of this video, but the idea behind it is to make a full functioning rear seat if someone did want to sit there, and make it look like it naturally is supposed to be in the car, like it would have came that way with the mini tubs in the seat. We don't want anything pulled weird or just, you know, set different. So that's the idea behind this. We want, if someone looks back there and they don't know what they're looking for, we want that seat to look right. But then when you look under the car and you see the real fat tires from the mini tub in this project for this white Cuda, that's the idea behind it. We just want the big tires, but the interior looking as factory as we can. So saying that, I told you I'm just going back through. I'm kind of just aligning all the brackets with the vice grips and running the MIG welder on really both sides. I'm not grinding any of the welds off. I didn't clean any of this bracket either. I just turned up the heat a little bit, and as I'm welding, I'm doing just long little bursts and kind of dragging it over before it blows through. I stop. So that's the best way to do it. Here we are, we're putting the burlap back on the seat. That's the first step, and then we're putting this edge, basically this extra padding around with the hog rings, and I'm going every 3-4 inches. Whenever the burlap right here and the extra padding up here start kind of pulling up, that's where I'll go ahead and put a hog ring on it, and then that's going to just make sure it just ties down. What this edge does is it makes sure the padding doesn't get ripped or get, you know, a hard edge, and it gives it extra material and support just so the seat's wrapping around and everything else. So if you can save this, put this piece back on, and like I said, just tie it down well.
Okay, you see we start with the hog rings, we put that extra padding. That's just going to create a sharp edge around here to make sure we don't pinch the seat cover. So what we're going to do, we're basically going to roll the seat cover over the top, and we're going to get a close-up on the hog ring pliers in a second, and I'll show you. It's real simple how they work, and we're just going to put the seat cover on like it was before. Actually, I'm going to put 2 more hog rings to tie this edge down in the back. There was 2 more down there. Let's continue wrapping this around, basically just stretching the seat cover back over so we have the pad and everything back in there. we're gonna flip it over, and we're gonna do exactly what we had before. So with the hog rings, so you have this clip right here. You see it's like a C-clip. The hog rings have a groove inside them. What you're gonna do, you basically put that in there, and then all you do is squeeze. And then it closes up just like that. Pinches it, that's what we were cutting off earlier. So like I said, it's a lot easier to just replace them than put new ones on, cut the old ones off. So what we're doing now, we're actually gonna work from the front, I think, right here. And I'm not an interior expert, so I just know enough to get myself in trouble with this. So we're basically gonna go around, you see all these holes. Remember what we talked about? The holes are where we're gonna put our hog rings in. They go in there, squeeze, let it go. So we're gonna work our way around, we're gonna pull tight, especially when you get to the back. What I'm probably gonna do, I'll do the whole front area, and then I'm gonna have Megan help me with the back, just so we can pull and make sure we get a good tight fitment on this thing. So real simple, let's continue on what we're doing. One at a time. Now I'm also trying to make sure I don't put the hog rings through the original holes, just because, I mean, we're close to it. I'm just putting them right next to it if I can. We see how clean and easy this is. We'll go back in time lapse, and we'll continue on this project.
This part of the process, really, if you take your time, is not that hard. Just work your way around and just make sure you keep putting tension and pulling the springs back over. That's going to prevent wrinkles in the seat as you're going around it.
Now, this edge right here, this edge is gonna be a little bit tighter, and this is where we're gonna have a little bit of ruffle. We gotta kind of pull it around, because don't forget, this is where we shrunk everything up. So naturally, this seat wants to sit out here. So this is where we gotta put a little strength in it. We're actually gonna do this back corner first. We're gonna roll it up, and I don't wanna go crazy with it, because what we want to do, we also want some of this to push against tight with the new wheel tubs. So see, if I did that, and I work my way to here, and then you see that's going to fold over like this. And I'm happy with that. I think, you know, for what we're looking at on this car, that will look really good. We'll flip it over, making sure it doesn't look crazy, but let's go on to, actually let's get this corner and then we'll get on to the other side.
Looking at this seat cover, you can see there's kind of a rope hard edge that goes around the whole thing that's stitched into the seat cover. As you're doing your hog rings, you need to make sure you go over that rope area, and that's what you're squeezing. That's going to hold the whole seat. That's the support to the whole seat cover.
One other thing too, I forgot to mention, you could see I did put some cheap epoxy out of a spray can. I used a VHT black epoxy. I really didn't clean it up that much. Again, this is on the inside, so this was just to kind of protect the seat for the most part. It's not going to win any car shoes if someone flips it over, but for what we're doing, I think it's more than sufficient. So that's why it looks a little black, and feel free to do that just to make sure your seat doesn't rust. I mean, you could sandblast this thing and everything else and take it to the next level, but like I said, on this car, this was more than sufficient enough, I believe.
So another piece of advice here is, if you're putting a new seat cover on, you really need to measure both sides of the seat. What you don't want to do is you don't want to be off 3 inches, especially if you put the seat in the car and the stitching isn't lined up in the center. It just looks weird with the two side seats. So this cover was easy enough that I knew exactly where it went, because we just went off the factory holes where the old hog rings were in, and they fit the holes in the seat frame. So everything lined up really good. But like I said, if you are using a brand new seat cover, you need to double check and triple check that measurement first.
Another thing I like to do, and this goes with the metalwork and everything I talked about, I kind of like to start in the center and work my way out. You see, I kind of did that here so we can push the bunches out on the outside. We don't want to be pulling the seat all the way this way and have a wrinkle on one side and nothing on the other. So that's another thing that I personally like to do. I caught the spring in that one. And there's, the main thing, there's this little lip right here. That's what you want to catch it around on the seat. You really need to make sure you're under that, and then that's how it's going to hold.
So we're actually fortunate on this older seat that it's been stretched out over these years. If you have a brand new seat cover that needs stretching, put it out in the sunlight for a day or two. That's going to help you pull the seat and let it stretch and be more workable when installing this.
All right, I'm gonna have Megan help me. All we're gonna do, basically, we won't even put on camera, we're gonna just kind of pull it over, and then I'm gonna clamp it while she does that, or vice versa. So we'll come back and we'll flip this over. We'll actually do the other one, and I'll show you both of them, and we'll do the final fitment in the car. All right, so look in here. We didn't film the back of the other one, but it's the same thing. We started at the top, we pulled in, and then this area was really tight. We had to actually push down on the seat to preload the springs to get it to wrap around. But you see, with all the modifications we made around these edges, everything still fits. You just have to pull it a little bit tighter. But let's go ahead and put it in yet. I haven't test fit it, and if this fits, we'll close out the video. So again, we just got to know where our hooks are. They kind of right there, and when you pull forward, you know they're in. So now we're going to put our bottom screws in. So this would be installing the back seat normally too on a regular car. And we'll leave it there for now. We might have to move it up a little bit with the seat, how it crams in. We'll see. But you see, this part of the seat fits. I mean, even around the edges, the seat's completely usable. It just pads off of it. We just got the back of this seat taken out. So looking at it, the seat almost looks factory. It fits with the curvature really well. So right there, I'm real happy with the way that seat looks. Let's hope the bottom fits in now. Now the bottom, the only thing we got that we had to tuck a little bit, we got a little bit of a ripple in this corner. We tried to pull it both different ways, but besides that, that was the only variances in the seat. So looking at it, the bottom's gonna go there, and you just jam it in there. So right now, we got the back seat on the Cuda with the mini tubs. I'm really happy. Everything's locked in. Everything's tight. It fits really well. You really can't see we modified it. So if you have an E-body car, if you have even F-body, we are going to do the 69 Firebird with the Detroit Speed Quattro Link kit. We're going to have to modify that whole seat, and that's going to take even more than this. So I'm going to do another video on an F-body, but hopefully if you're doing an E-body, you have mini tubs. This explains how you would set the rear seat in the car and get it to fit really well. You see there's no side-to-side shaking on it too. That's what I was talking about earlier. Once we get the padding in, everything holds down pretty tight. So I'm Rick from These Classic Cars. Hopefully this video helped you out. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, please like, comment, subscribe to our channel. And till the next video, I'll see you next time.